Welcome back to Alley Chats. I'm your host, Rob Southgate. Alley Chats is like a virtual artist's alley featuring interviews with artists, filmmakers, podcasters, writers, and really any creative person you might find at a pop culture convention. My goal is to help draw attention to cool people and hopefully help them get some new fans. I want this podcast to raise up these amazing people and to inspire you, the listener, to chase your dreams as well. You can follow Alley Chats on Facebook under Alley Chats Podcast and join in the conversations. I'll add more social media in the future, but for now, that is the best place to interact with us. You can also email me directly if you would like to be a guest or have a guest suggestion. My email is rob@smgpods.com. D, I'm so excited to have you on the show. I've been interviewing quite a number of authors. Anyone that listens to this knows that I've been having a lot of authors. And you're my first high fantasy author. So we've got some talking to do. I'm excited. So let's set it up here. First of all, D, why don't you tell people who you are, give a little backstory, and then we'll get into your books.
Okay, sounds good. I'm delighted to be here too. Actually, really excited to be able to do these little chats. So I'm D Lambert. At least that's how I write. I'm also Deborah is my full name, but I have been writing sword and sorcery and high fantasy novels. I started releasing them in 2019 originally, and I've just finished off writing the Son of No Man series, which is a 6-book high fantasy story that covers the foundations of a kingdom, what I lovingly call doing all the right things for all the wrong reasons. Some very gray characters. I started writing them because I was sort of fed up with your tropes. Too many tropes, too much of the same thing. I could pick up a fantasy novel because I was a voracious reader, and I could just predict where it was going. And so I decided I wanted to write differently. I do tend to do the big world stuff. My magic comes with consequence. My characters are decidedly gray. You get hurt, you're going to bleed. You may be maimed. There is no wave a wand and make it all right in my stories. I just like it a little bit down and dirty, and keeping it, which is, it's weird to say, realistic fantasy. Like just more real.
That's not weird.
Okay, good.
That's not weird at all. You know, it's making me think of, there's that, and I don't know the name of it, so this is going to go nowhere, but there's that video game that is a fantasy video game, and they tried to make it as realistic as possible, where when you get hit with a sword, that plate mail may work for a few hits, and then it doesn't.
Yeah, fair. Things
and you can't magically have
you don't just you just don't heal everything back and suddenly your equipment is totally fine. Or if you're in the rain for a while, you may get a sickness, but that's not, I guess it wasn't traditionally done. I think it can be done to build the world. I know that that's not exciting action. There's other ways of doing exciting action, which I totally do, but just it adds such depth to the world to have those details in it that makes it more realistic. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted when I was reading my stories. I didn't want as much fluff. I wanted more like depths and like substance. So that's what I decided to write.
I love it. So this series, Son of No Man, it is 6 books. Is that it? That is the completion of that series?
It's the completion of the arc for the first king of Espar. Okay. So this is the foundation, as I said, of a kingdom, the old-fashioned way, which is by conquest. So he trying to take over the world without anyone noticing for a long period of time. And then halfway through the series, he has to shift and people kind of notice. At which point you just have to take over the rest, which is what we've done over 6 books. For better or for worse, you can decide if you read it. So after the 6 books, there is a spinoff. It's in the hands of the editor right now. His last name is sort of book 7-ish. It takes 2 of these other characters, the supporting characters, and follows their thread because we didn't quite get to wrap up with some of what they were doing. And so that's coming out. And then after that, there's others in the world. I have others in different timelines. I have others with different characters. But when it comes to the story of Tomas, the first king of Espar, that's it. That's it. 6 books.
6 books, you're out. But this is a world you've built that has multiple stories and different characters to follow. So we're far from done with this, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, we can keep going for sure. I had a few other sort of young adult novels that were in the same world but took place in a different timeline. I've got more of that as well coming down the pipes. At some point, you check the website, you'll see a book called Leon. Some point that's going to hit the market. It's finished. It's going through beta reads right now. It has a second part to it called Corelands that is, again, hopefully coming down the pipes eventually. So it's more in the same world, similar styles, although little different flavors depending on which characters you're following at the time.
I love that. I think that's awesome. I love stories that go wide that have the depth already like baked into it. You know what I mean? Well, you do because you're writing it.
Well, you enjoy reading those ones. Like there's just, you don't want it to end in some ways. It's a tricky balance though, because you don't want it to end because you love the characters and you love the world and you keep wanting to do it. But you do want a conclusion somewhere. You don't want to just keep going and going and going. I can certainly name a few series that have just petered out instead of finishing. And that is a frustration. Like you want to be able to pick up a book and know that you're going to get some satisfaction by the end of the series. And that's something that we don't always get. So I'm really excited that the 6-book series got to finish. All 6 books are out. Last one came out September 20th. So it's out there already. So you can know that when you pick up book 1, you're going to see a full progression, full story. But if you love the world and you love the characters and the style, then you can still, there's more to go. So it's a balancing act that way.
Okay. So we're talking high fantasy here. You alluded to other series that maybe were less satisfying because they kind of dribble on. What would you say are your favorite series? Or let's go with series. What are your favorite series that are out there?
I mean, I wouldn't be a fantasy writer if I didn't mention that, yes, I've read Tolkien, and yes, I enjoy Tolkien. I have not read it as many times as my husband. He's read it like 25 times.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a fair number. But I do consider it kind of like a foundation knowledge thing. Although I have to admit, I kind of view it more like the textbook instead of like the fun, because there's a lot of things in it that definitely translates to current times. There's a lot of stuff that's no longer really how we do things. But because it was such a huge player in the foundation of the genre, I feel like you have to follow it. You still have to.
I completely agree. I'm a big fan. So
yeah. So right now I'm bouncing between stuff because I like stuff that I said have some degree of substance, but I admit to losing interest pretty quickly if things get too repetitive. So like Robert Jordan as an example, that I never finished Wheel of Time. I admit it. It's a shame because it did peter out. Sword of Truth series as well, which, oh gosh, I'm going to get it wrong. I can't remember if it's Good Kind. No, it's the other one. Brooks? Anyway, one of the Terrys.
Well, okay, it's got to be Good Kind because Terry Brooks is Shannara. So...
Okay, there you go. I've read those ones too. Read Shannara as well. Actually enjoyed Shannara a lot. So that's probably one of my faves is going to be the Shannara. Right now, I seem to be on a binge of a little bit more light and fluffy. So Jim Butcher's series.
Oh yeah,
Harry Dresden. That's my secret pleasure.
Those are fun. Those are like chewing gum.
Exactly. That's not high fantasy, though. That is not high fantasy. That is urban fantasy, and it's fun, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, but going outside of high fantasy, I didn't want you to stick to high fantasy unless that's all you read. I want to hear what are the series because that gives insight into kind of what you like to do. So when you take in Jim Butcher, who knows, one of your offshoots, you might kind of get chewing gum Butcher-esque in there. It's funny because you got to diversify.
I don't think you want to read only what you're reading. Like I read recently The Poppy War. That's grimdark. That was different. I actually had to make an effort. I went to the library and I got out a Harlequin romance. I want to be able to tell you which one. Just because I was like, I should know more about this. So I did. Sure. And maybe that will make some of my romance subplots a little better if I throw one in. Don't know. But I do read around a fair bit. I bounce around a lot of different genres, including into nonfiction. Like there's some stuff that I've read about like Sapiens recently, which is another one that I've read. Anyway, I've been bouncing around a fair bit. I've only recently discovered that I can read books while my kid is going to sleep and he doesn't get excited about me reading a book as compared to like typing or working. So I've like started reading all sorts of stuff again. It's very exciting.
Nice. Yeah, I was a big reader until I started going back to school. And then it blows your brain out. And then, so in my 40s, all of a sudden I was like, I'm not reading like I was. Then I started reading again and I went back and got my master's and I have not been able to go back to it the way I used to. So talk about Shannara. I had never read Shannara. So I have 10 of the Shannara books on my shelf right here.
To be read.
I've read the first half of the first book and loved it, but it was so derivative of Lord of the Rings that I was like, why did I buy the series? But halfway through the book, they kind of go, what I loved is he kind of went like, and we're at Mordor, and now everything's different.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like you thought you knew where you were going, but it's okay. We're just going to take this somewhere else.
Right. But he did it. It's like he flipped the whole thing on page 300. And I was like, okay, this is worth my time. I'm going to read this series.
That was fun. I guess the other one for high fantasy that I hadn't even mentioned was a Malazan Book of the Fallen.
I don't know that one.
You want a heavy fantasy read, that's the book. First one's Garden of the Moon. Yes. And I loaned that book out probably more than any other book, but with a high disclaimer that you have to be a fantasy reader and you have to give it time because it's confusing as all hail when you start.
I've run into a number of those. Well, in different genres too. Like I love horror, I love fantasy, I love sci-fi. Sci-fi can kick your butt. You get the right author and you go, what are they even talking about? And then you have to research what they're talking about to go, oh, this is a core concept and they're using this actual technical thing. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think every
classics, you go back to classics sometimes.
But I think every genre does have its own sort of expectations and it's the lingo. So if people have read it, you kind of have this assumption that you know what a warp drive is or something similar. Like maybe it's a different name. Oh, it's like a warp drive and you're good to go. Where and fantasy does it too. Like there's certain words. I love this. I do use it Grammarly sometimes to sort of help me flow and stuff like that. And it has this thing where it will flag words that a knowledgeable audience may not know.
Okay.
So it's trying to be helpful and tell me that, as an example, your knowledgeable audience might not know the word, in one case, ostentatious. Okay, fair. You know what?
Okay.
Not everybody will. But certain words in fantasy, you're going to know. And one of them was steed. That blew my mind. Steed. And they're like, people don't know what steed is. I'm like, it's
in fantasy, absolutely.
Fantasy, of course you're going to know what steed is. So you do have to kind of rate to your genre, and there's certain expectations, but you do have books that are like, you can start on this book as never having read science fiction, or you can start on this book having never read fantasy. There's other books you should not do that. You need to be in the genre a bit before those are okay. Malazan's one of those. Don't start there. Start somewhere else.
So going forward with your series, and I know that we've talked about this world, are you looking at some point building another world, maybe jumping genres? Are you like, it's all about high fantasy and I see so much here, I'm the George Lucas of this world?
Honestly, I did a poll recently for fun about the next book I should release, because his last name is coming out. That's another S-Bar book. Fine and Dandy, it's done. The one after that, what am I going to do with it? And the two options was Leon or something called To Walk Into the Sands. And this was the one that originally going back, so it's finished, Four Horsemen, the publisher, caught and actually asked me to become one of their authors over. So this is a book that they were aware of, but because it didn't have the same series potential right out of the gate, we ended up going with a different series.
Sure.
But To Walk Into the Sands is a completely different world. I don't yet know. I have to think about it a bit. Does it count as high fantasy? I don't think so. I think it counts more of a sword and sorcery style. But it's more, well, to put it in context, it takes place on a desert world. So it's not like your Western European sort of style. It's not your classic anything. Yeah. It's taken more from like jungles and Africa kind of styles for their technology level. Like they're way less, but they do have some magic. It's mostly shifter magic.
Okay.
So very, very different style. And apparently that one won the poll. So that might be coming out as the one after his last name, assuming the publisher is okay and like it. It's very different. It also has a different, like, high fantasy tends to be about save the world to a degree, change the world. This one, To Walk Into the Sands, is almost an end of life. It's someone who's lived their entire life and he's looking at the end of it, and more like a legacy, and like he has to do one more thing before he dies kind of idea. Okay. So very different concepts. Instead of like coming of age or saving the world or defeating the bad guys. Yeah, there's bad guys, but this is more about the internal struggles and character development than, say, Son of No Man. So that's interesting. That's been fun. And it does have a sequel. I'm writing it right now.
Oh, see? So you are doing some
branching
extracurricular world building, I'll say.
Yeah. That one's got the world built. And I'm 25,000 words into the second book of the series.
Wow, you're rocking it. So are your books pretty hefty?
Most run around 100,000, so they're not too bad. Occasionally you'll pop one up at 110, in other cases like 9,500 or 1,000.
No, that's not bad.
No, they're kind of average run of the mill for fantasy. Fantasy typically runs somewhere in that ballpark. You get your light, young adult, more 75,000, but a little smaller. But any of the adult novels tend to be closer to 100,000. And fantasy is like that. If you could pick up, like you said, horror and mystery, those will be shorter, less world building, less of that needed.
Unless it's Stephen King, it is,
then it's like
here's it. Oh, and here's the director's cut of it. That's another 700 pages. Yeah. I remember when I bought the stand. I got the stand. I didn't buy it. I got it as a Christmas present one year. And they got me the extended edition. And I was already like, oh my God, this is such a huge book. And then they handed that thing. Boom. I was like, well, there goes a year.
But it's Stephen King. It works.
King.
It does work usually. I have to admit for that. I'm a wimp when it comes to horror, so I'm very careful about the Stephen King I read. But
now, do you find his stuff scary? I don't find it necessarily that scary.
Some of it, yes, I will admit that. Other stuff, it's more adventure, and it's mind trippy in some ways.
Mind trippy is a good way to put it.
Mind trippy, yes, less spooky horror kind of style.
Yeah, except for Pet Sematary, that scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, like I said, so it depends a bit.
That one, it was like, I remember reading it, and it was like controversial at the time, and everyone's like, it's his scariest book, and I was like, yeah, we'll see. Oh yeah, that was so upsetting. I was just like, and when I look at it,
logical too, which is like it's not just like boo spooky. It's actually a really deep kind of spook.
Yeah, that one stayed with me. Yeah,
I've got a.
So you're a wimp, huh?
Imagination is too good, and I have trouble with anything that's horror because it sticks with me forever.
Yeah, I can see that. Jim Butcher, those ideas will stick with you, but they're not that scary.
No, and you have
Talking Skull, that'll stay with you.
Oh yeah, but then it's like, but he's also going to give you sass about whether or not he gets his day off afterwards. Like that's what the Skull is going to, Bob, I need you. His name's Bob, for God's sakes. Like he does it well to have that high stakes. I just finished Battleground, so that's like the high stakes. And then but throws in the humor. I mean, they're joking about, what was it, boot to the head, and everyone's like, nah, like, what? No, they kick him in the head. Like, so you have that flippant sense of humor to offset it. I don't think Stephen does that as well.
No, I don't think so. I was at a Comic-Con very recently, and there was a guy walking with a stick and everything, and he had the skull in his hand, and I was like, yep. And then he was fully invested to himself, not doing it for show. I mean, he was, but he wasn't. He started talking to the skull as he was walking by, and he was like, I know, but shut up. And I was like, oh my God, just please be this character. Just walk through here, be Dresden. I'm in love with this. Beautiful. It was so fun. Did
he have a hat?
He did. He did,
because that's the ongoing joke, right? All the covers have Dresden wearing a hat.
Yep.
Dresden never wears that hat.
He had the hat on.
Yeah. Everyone knows it because what the cover looks like, but then that's the joke. Is he at one point, I think there's at one story, he puts the hat on in the book, and then kind of goes, "Yeah, that's not me," and takes it off.
Right.
And that's
but it's on every cover.
This nod to this. It's been expected now. Every cover, he's got the flicking hat on.
This guy had the hat. He had the cover hat. It was right on. And the skull was great. I mean, it was really fantastic. And it was but at the same time, it was so subtle. I mean, you're watching all these other costumes and, the cosplay. And it was like, here's just a guy in a hat and a duster, and he's carrying a stick. It could be anybody. I'm like, it's not just anybody.
Yeah.
That was
we had fun with that. We went down to a con recently, the first con I've ever been to, which was so exciting.
Which one was it?
We went to Dragon Con.
Oh, fun.
Start at the deep end. And we did. Every time you're standing, like waiting in line for something, we were just, my husband and I were walking down and be like, recognize that one, recognize, who the heck? I feel like I should know that one.
Yeah.
Because my husband does a bit more anime stuff than I do. So some of them he'll get, but I do more video games, or did. I haven't done it in ages, not basically since kids. And so I recognize more of the video games ones than he did. So it was a fun little contest to see who could recognize them the fastest.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay. I'm going to ask you the big question that I ask on this show because we're almost out of time.
Okay.
This was a perfect segue into it.
Oh, no.
This is your ultimate Comic-Con. Okay. You've only been to one, but now imagine it's the Comic-Con of your dreams and you get to see one person. Who is that person that you're just like, oh my God, I get to see them?
Oh, see, that's a tricky one. Because there's so many.
I know it is. That's why I ask it on here.
Like actors, or you could be writers, or you could be.
They could be living. They could be dead. This is a fantasy con. You're making it up.
This is perfect.
Whatever you want it to be. And I've had some stellar answers, so the pressure is on.
I don't know if my stellar answer. I would love to meet George R.R. Martin.
That's a fantastic answer. Yes. You know why it's a stellar answer?
He's got a great sense of humor. He's got a huge imagination. And
I hear he's fun
for the genre. I would love to have 20 minutes with that man and just chat with him.
Do you know what? You're the first person to bring George R.R. Martin up, and I am shocked. That to me would be a layup. Like I would figure, 20% of the people I talk to would be like, "Oh, come on, George R.R. Martin," because he's on the scene, he's out there, and he's great. He's
living it. He knows it. And I just remember seeing at one point, I think he was on The Late Show with John Oliver or something like that. But anyway, he was joking about, oh, no, I'm just killing off your favorite character. Like he seems to have a decent sense of humor. Like he doesn't take himself too seriously, despite what he writes. And he hasn't, as far as I can tell, let the fame go to his head because he's exploded. Like he's done amazing.
Yeah, I don't think he has.
He really was in it for the long haul. Like those books were out. The Game of Thrones stuff was out for years, probably over a decade before it exploded. And he just, as far as I can tell, was like, I don't know what to do now because like he's got more money than God and he doesn't know what to do with it. So I think he's a remarkable individual just on so many levels.
Well, that's a great answer, Dee. I think I would love to meet George R.R. Martin. I think that's really solid. Okay, we're at the end here now. We're going to do a couple of things. One is, what book do you want them to like jump in and order? I'll put it in the show notes. What's the one? Is it book one? Is it the latest book? Where do you want people to go?
I would go for Raiden. Grab Raiden. It's book one of the Son of No Man series. It's a good launch off spot to go. It's available in audiobook. It's available in paperback. It's available on ebook, like everywhere. And it's a great introduction to the characters and kind of sets up the world. So it's a really good intro to the world of the Tainted and Espar and all that kind of stuff. So that would be the one for sure.
I'm glad you said that because if you had said book 6, I would have said, okay, we need to talk about your marketing because you really got to start with book 1. Even though I've been interviewing people, they have like, well, yeah, but some people have 10 books and they're like, you know what? They can be read in any order. Get all of them, but start with book 4 because, so.
Now, these ones are because they follow the sequence in general. One. I mean, I have other books out there, but if you're wanting to get into the high fantasy stuff and want to get into the series, obviously book 1 makes the most sense.
So Raiden it is. I'll put the links in the show notes. Number 2, where can people find you? What's the best place for people to interact with you?
I think the easiest place to find everything you need is the website, which is D, like the letter D, lambertauthor.com. Should be relatively easy to remember because it's got everything else you need there. It's got the blog. It's got the contact page. I love getting emails. So by all means, fire me an email through the contact page. Or it's also got the links to your Facebook and your Twitter and X.
All your other stuff. Yeah.
All your other stuff right there, including the Amazon book links and all that kind of stuff. Plus you can read about the different books. They've got sneak peeks. They've got each of the individual books with their blurbs. You can see what's coming. I do update the banners regularly so you know what's kind of in the works. And you can sign up for the newsletter, which is also a great way to stay on top of what's happening and where things are going and get some other deals.
I love it. You said everything that my marketing heart loved to hear. Dee, thank you so much for being on.
Trick question, was it?
That was not a trick question, but you did so beautifully. Thank you so much for being on. And I am going to dive into Raiden first. I can't wait to read it. I love fantasy, so this is a big one for me. Getting into your high fantasy is definitely in my wheelhouse. Just know it's going to take me forever to read because that Masters destroyed my brain.
No, I get that. It's hard to find that time. Like I said, I wasn't reading much of anything. I was writing, but I wasn't reading much of anything for years.
Yeah.
And that was just virtue of life. So it's nice. I've been able to get back into it. But I feel like I have some catching up to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Good luck with these.
Thank you. And yeah, we'll talk to you later. Thanks.
You can connect with me on social media or via email. All the links are found in the show notes. Oh, and it would really help me if you would rate and review this show on whatever platform you use to listen to this podcast. Good reviews help others find the show, which ultimately helps these incredible guests get more exposure. Alley Chats is a production of Southgate Media Group, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Rob Southgate. Thanks again for listening to Alley Chats. And don't forget to support indie artists.